Well, hi everybody, I'm Sheldon Fetty. I'm an alcoholic, and Phil is probably surprised to find out that lack of power is still his dilemma. Something that we all still have to learn from time to time in our sobriety, right? It's an honor and a privilege to get to come and share with you guys today. I've shared at this meeting before, maybe a year or so ago, and it's always nice to be invited back places, right? And not with a warrant attached or a bill attached, but actually, yeah, come on back and hang out with us again. It's a neat deal. Uh, it's an honor to get to come and share with you guys. Anytime I participate in AA or tell my story or talk at a meeting, I've always got a couple of things in mind. Uh, Ideally, I would like to entertain most of you. I'd like to inspire a couple of you and only upset one or two of you. And normally, if I upset you, I tell you that you should probably call your sponsor after the meeting. Don't tell me I don't want to know about it. But this meeting is unique because there's a gentleman who's Charlie H. from Buckalea, Florida, and that's my sponsor. So if I upset you, just direct message him. He's here to be of service tonight to fade all of the flack that you guys might want to give me. I'm in Las Vegas, Nevada. My home group is the Common Solution Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. We meet 4 times a week. We meet on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Sundays, and Saturdays. So if you're ever in Vegas, my phone number is by my name. You're welcome to take down my number and reach out, and we'll get you to one of our meetings or a different meeting if that's better. I already told you that Charlie's my sponsor, and he knows he's my sponsor, and that's the most important thing about a sponsor, right? Is that I got guys that call me sponsor, like they might tell their friends I'm their sponsor, and I couldn't pick them out of a lineup for Christ's sakes, right? So the most important thing I can tell you about Charlie is that he knows who I am, and he's rooting for me, which is a great deal. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my drinking, not much. Phil had asked me, because most of you guys had heard my story before, if I would share on the topic of step 6 and 7, and I'm gonna try my best to do that. It's kind of a weird topic, isn't it? Because boy, they're the flyover steps. I don't know if your experience is the same as my experience. When I very first did my first run through the steps, my first inventory, my first glance at 6 and 7, I was about 2 or 3 months sober. My sobriety date is July 17th of 1996. It was before New Year's of that year. I'd written this inventory, and this inventory was as honest of an inventory as I could have written. And it was a good inventory. It had on there my mom and my dad and my brother and past girlfriends and past bosses. And it had on there school teachers and uncles and aunts. Really, it started out with the primary relationships of mom and dad and trickled down to just about anybody that had had any meaningless contact in my pathetic little life, right? Everybody I'd ever run into, I had a resentment towards, and which is funny because if you would have asked me, I probably would have said that my biggest character defect was that I was a people pleaser. Any other people pleasers here? Right? But I do my first inventory, and the first thing that's clear is that if I am a people pleaser, I'm not very good at it. I should probably stop immediately because everybody in my life I'm mad at for some reason, and I know they're mad at me. And I do this inventory, and some magic happens. Not with every name, and not to the degree that it did in subsequent years and subsequent work in AA, but something magical happened with a lot of the names on that list. I got to see for the very first time that they weren't really the problem. I got to see for the very first time that at minimum, at minimum, I had increased the angst and I had had behavior that made things worse. But in most cases, I was actually the cause of the whole damn thing, right? In most cases, I was the one that was taking actions that was burning the relationship to the ground, or had destroyed the relationship entirely. And we come through this was our course, and we look at all this stuff, and we look at my dishonesty, my selfishness, my self-seeking, and my fear, and boy, we end up with a list of character defects or of things about me that, boy, I'd have a much better life if those things weren't driving me. Uh, I am selfish. I want what I want. I want it now, and I think you should give it to me. I want you to care about me. When we have a conversation, I leave the conversation knowing nothing about you and hoping you know everything about me. I'm self-seeking. I want a bigger piece of everything. I mean, boy, if you want to get half of something, the only way that I can, back in the day we divide drugs into half. Me and a buddy would be splitting the drugs. The only way that you would get half is if I was splitting it and you chose first, right? But if I'm splitting it and I choose first, there's no such thing of half. I want a bigger piece of the cake. I want more money for the work that I do. I want more of everything. And I am dishonest. And I'm dishonest in a sneaky way. I mean, I've always been somewhat cash register honest. And I say somewhat because I've stolen some things in my life. It's not that I'm a thief, it's that people have left me with opportunities that were just impossible for me to refuse. I mean, if you leave too much stuff laying around for too long, I'm going to have to get a little bit, right? But I'm mostly cash register honest. I've always been blessed with the ability to make money. But I'm dishonest in another way. I'll share a side story with you that this didn't happen in my first inventory, but it happened pretty early in sobriety. If you would have asked me, I would have told you that the biggest hardship in my life, the worst thing that ever happened, the thing that ruined my life, was that my dad left when I was 2 years old. And he was a big part of my resentments, and I hated my dad, and my dad ruined my life. And I did the inventory. And I got a little bit of space between that, and that's a different talk. That's a four-step talk, but I got a little bit of space between the hatred for my dad, and he came back in my life, and we started to rebuild a relationship. But I still had this thing that I would say that my dad ruined my life. And I was sitting with a friend. I don't even, it's so funny because I remember the situation, the conversation, and the results of the conversation. I don't even remember who I was talking to, but I was talking to an alcoholic. And I used that phrase. I go, well, my dad ruined my life. And he sat back in his chair. He said, what do you mean? I go, well, he left when I was 2 years old, and, I was raised by blah, 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 blah. And he ruined my life. And he said to me, your life does not look very ruined. And at the time, I was the general manager of a large Chevrolet dealership. And if you know much about the car business, that means I was making more money than I could spend. I was married with a healthy son. I had a house with a swimming pool. I had all the money and all the stuff I wanted. I was a big part of my home group. I had a lot of friends. I was sponsored a bunch of guys close to my sponsor. I was going on vacation whenever I wanted to, and I was driving a fancy car. And when he said to me, your life doesn't look very ruined, I thought to myself, he's right. I had a pretty good life. And I still have a pretty good life. So what do I mean when I say my dad ruined my life? And the reality is that when my dad left when I was 2 years old, we lived in the cold, freezing north of England in a city called Leeds, which is a beautiful city, but I have no desire to live there. He moved from there to London, London to California. At 16, I moved to Southern California to live with him. I moved to palm trees, beaches, pretty girls. I got a great career. My life took off. I got sober when I moved to Las Vegas. I'm sober in Las Vegas. Had my dad not left when I was 2 years old, I'd still be living in the north of England, and my life would not look anything like it did at that moment. And I loved my life. Yet I'm telling people my dad ruined my life. And it's a level of dishonesty that just permeates my life. I'm the guy that needs 10% of the information. I make up the rest. I don't need to know all the facts. You say hi to me, look me in the eye, I look at your clothes, talk to you for 5 minutes. I know just about everything I will ever need to know about you in order to judge you properly, right? This level of dishonesty that I have about people, situations, what's going to happen, what might happen. I mean, boy, and I don't have a strong view of this coming out of my first inventory, but I'm getting a smell of it. I'm starting to see a little bit of it. So I'm selfish, I'm self-seeking, I'm dishonest, and why am I all those things? Because I'm afraid. I don't even know I'm afraid at first. At first, I think I'm angry, but it turns out that I'm only angry because I'm afraid that things aren't going to go my way. I got a way that I think things should be. And I got a vision of how I think the world should look. And I have this, I've painted a picture, right, of how it's supposed to be. And I have dug in with my dishonesty, selfishness, and self seeking. I've dug in that the picture is right and it's how it's supposed to be. And now I am looking for people who are trying to attack my picture of the world. I have these X-ray goggles, this laser vision where I can see the people that are trying to mess with my vision. And I'm afraid and I'm terrified you're going to pull the house of cards down. I'm afraid that you're going to stop me from getting the things that I want, or you're going to take the things that I have, which is a trap, isn't it? Because if I'm afraid that I won't get the things I'm going to get, and I'm afraid I'm going to lose the things I have, getting things doesn't remove any of my fear. It just changes it from fear I won't get it to fear I'm going to lose it. And I am in a spiral of fear. I'm afraid that I have, along with all the other stories I've told, I've written a story about who I am. And I don't write love stories. I don't write stories about how great I am and wonderful I am. I try and portray that on the outside so you'll like me, but inside, I don't like me very much. First of all, I've been there at all the squirmy, weird little things I've done, driven by selfishness, dishonesty, fear, and self-seeking. So I've been you only know the stuff you've caught me for. I know the stuff I think, right? Which is really bizarre sometimes. So I don't like me very much. And I'm afraid that you are going to see me for who I think I am. And then I'm afraid that we'll both be right. So I come out of this inventory and listen, I'm only 90, 120 days sober, and I don't have as clear a vision as perhaps I do at 26 years sober. Although some of my friends would say, your vision's not that clear at 26 years sober, Punky. But it is clearer now than it was then. But I got this vision coming out of my inventory. And my sponsor says to me, when I think he's right, that although people have these long lists of character defects, and if you Google it, you'll come up with, 175, there's 221 people in the meeting. I bet we can come up with one each and write a list. He said to me that for his purpose, and hopefully for my purpose, that really they're all trapped or delineated from the four, that really all of them are forms of self-seeking, self-centeredness, dishonesty, and fear, and that all of them can probably even be traced back to fear. So the question in step 6 becomes, Sheldon, are you now willing that God should remove all these defects of character? Well, yeah. I mean, we've just spent 4 or 5 hours talking about what a puke I am, for crying out loud. You better believe God can he now take them all, every one? You bet. Will you humbly ask him to do so? Sign me up. I mean, I'm done with 6 and 7 in 3.5 minutes, right? And now I want to get back to the sexy work in Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to write an 8-step list and get about doing some amends that I can brag about doing at my home group, right? But I'm done. 6 and 7, like, they're the namby-pamby flyover steps, for God's sakes. And I get to underline and put exclamation points on my opinion about 6 and 7 because someone in an AA meeting said, well, Wilson only ever wrote 2 paragraphs, one on 6, one on 7. Can't really be a big deal. And I agree. So I leave my sponsor's house and I go about my life. And I tell you, on the way home, now I don't remember this. This is not literal. It's figurative, but I'll bet you, boy, if we could reround the tape, it might be literal. On the way home, I was yelling at traffic, right? On the way home, I'm afraid I'm not going to get where I need to be on time on the way home. I'm afraid that some idiot's going to hit me on the way home. I'm right in traffic. I pull up next to a pretty girl and I'm thinking to myself, boy, I'd like to sleep with her. I look over the other window, there's some guy listening to music I don't like, and I'm thinking I want to kick his ass. And I'm not even home from doing my inventory, for God's sakes, right? The next day I wake up and I go to work. Well, I remember when I first started that job. When I first started that job, I'd walk in the office, my boss would come by and he'd go, good morning, Sheldon, how are you? Nice to see you, glad you're here. Is there anything you need? Well, I've been there 3 or 4 years by now. And and he didn't even know I'm here yet. I bet you I didn't even need to show. These people don't appreciate me. They don't, I come to work sober. And when I mean sober, I don't mean not drinking. I mean I'm here 15 minutes early. I stay all day, for God's sakes. Do everything they want me to do in front of them. I don't leave till the fire. I mean, and they just, right? They just don't. And my wife would, oh my God. Man, right? And the people in the home group, I mean, I got judgments about everybody. Mr. Grateful, right? Oh, he's so grateful. I bet you are grateful, pal. Look at your life. What about those of us that live in the real world, right? Mr. Happy, right? They're like characters from a kid's cartoon, for God's sakes. The guy that shares the same thing every week over and over. Now it's been a couple of years since I've done the inventory, right? And I'm nuts. And I go to my sponsor and I'm just like, oh my God. What happened was I drove up to his house and I knocked on the door and he opened the door and I must have had this look on my face because he looked at me and he said, oh my God, I've seen that look before. That's the Sheldon can't manage his own life look. You better come inside. Right? And we go inside and I just puke all this stuff about everything that's going on and everyone that's doing everything wrong. And I'm in my head and I don't understand. And you puke that stuff out a little bit and then the tears start to come, right? I get rid of the anger and the tears start to come. And I tell him, I go, you know what it feels like? It feels like I'm getting worse. It feels like I'm getting sicker. It feels like I'm in AA and I'm doing all this stuff and maybe I'm not like you people, right? Because you guys come to AA and you don't drink and your lives get wonderful. Oh, I'm sober too, yet oh my God, I'm so grateful to God and AA, and I just don't feel like that. Maybe I'm getting sicker. And he laughed a little and he said, look, he goes, I knew you when you first came in, and you're not getting worse. There is improvement in your behavior. You're not standing up in the middle of the meeting, pointing at somebody with spittle coming out of your mouth, correcting them for what they shared or asking them yeah, I used to take it, when people would share in AA in a general way, I would take it personally, right? As if somebody had gone up to them before the meeting and shared with them what's going on with my life so they could fix me in the meeting in their five. I would take everything personally. I would take your life personally. Everything was personal, right? So he goes, you're not getting worse. You are markedly better than you were when you got here, but you have room to grow. And boy, I hope I always feel like I have room to grow. I hope I always feel like there are things in my life that I could do better. And I know Charlie wishes there were things. Actually, I think he's entertained by my life. So I think he hopes I remain as crazy as I am. But, right, I hope I always have room to grow. But he said this to me. He said, when you were new, you were not aware of your behavior. When you were new, you didn't do any kind of a regular inventory. You didn't ever sit at night when you got home and think about your day and how you behaved. When you were mean to someone and they gave you that look, you didn't even notice that look. Now you're still mean to people, but you notice the look. You are aware of the way that you affect the world around you, and it's starting to cause you some pain and anxiety. Some of the behavior is better, some of the behavior is the same, but you're becoming painfully aware. I have a very good friend of mine that says this thing that I love. He says, self awareness without a sense of humor is depression. And I was starting to get self awareness and I had no sense of humor about myself. And it was, in fact, starting to cause depression. And after we talked, what he said really upset me. Because what he said was, he said, I think what you have, Sheldon, is you have a step 6 and 7 problem. And I said, don't be ridiculous. I've done step 6 and 7. And he laughed, boy. Some of you were laughing. He laughed. He goes, 6 and 7, boy. He said, and he said this phrase, and I remember this one too. It's funny, the things you pick up along the way that have so much depth and meaning for you. He said that step 1 was his ability not to drink. But step 6 and 7, and how well he was trying to live by the principles in 6 and 7, were the thing that decided whether or not he was comfortable in his sobriety. It was the driver of his serenity. And, just like any other time that I've been in trouble in my life, and I was in trouble, he had me dive into step 10 and do a long form inventory. Now, it's just semantics, right? Some people call that doing a fourth step again, and it's just not the way I was raised in AA. I was raised in AA that step 4 is person makes me uncomfortable like this. And it's these same character defects. There is an undercurrent of fear in my life that I thought would go away. When I was new, they used to tell this joke that I don't think is very funny. Uh, and maybe they don't, I don't hear it in Vegas very much anymore. Maybe they do in your part of the world, but it was this thing where people would say, when fear knocks on the door, if faith answers, there's nobody there. As if I believe in God, I won't be afraid, which means I'm doing something wrong because I think I believe in God. In fact, I know I do. It may not be your God. A friend of mine asked me the other day, about my faith, and I said the best I can tell you is that I'm a pagan, quasi-Buddhist, atheist Jew, and beyond that, I don't really know what box I fit in, right? But so I have this connection with this energy, this power, this spirit, this thing that we call God, and I have a lot of faith in it, and I trust it, and I know that I dig it. It's my thing, right? And I know, and yet I am often afraid. And yet I am often afraid. And my fear often sets me on a path until inventory catches me of selfishness, self-seeking, and dishonesty based on the underlying self-centered fear that drives me. And what is step 6 for me? It is the moment of realization that that is what I'm doing. And then what do I do with that information? It is not that I will never be driven like that again. It is that when I am driven, and I love how the book says this when it's talking about step 10 in the big book, when these crop up, right? Not if. Like it may crop up for the little people. It won't crop, not for me, right? Because it's if, but no. When these crop up, when fear comes at me and sets alight my selfishness, self-centeredness, my dishonesty, what do I do with it? How quickly can I identify it? Boy, isn't that a great question, right? Because don't I act the worst when it takes me longer to identify it? There are times where it takes me, I will have hurt 3 or 4 people, screwed up a couple of relationships, destroyed a day or two, right? Really just on a tear. And then on the 3rd day I'll go, oh my God. And sometimes it's within a minute. Sometimes a lot of more, thank God, more often than not, while the words are coming out of your mouth that are going to trigger the fear, a voice in my head goes, nope, don't do it. It's only fear. And I get to go to God in my head without you noticing, right? Pops, let me just not say, oh, let me, right? And I'm able to do a step 6 in the moment. Papa, let me trust you. Let me trust that not that you'll fix the situation. Here's a goofy thing. And I don't know if this is right or wrong, but it seems to be right for my life. I have had my share of trauma. I just have. I have had this, well, boy, my wife, ex-wife, and I were pregnant 4 times. We only have 1 son. We saw 4 heartbeats, 1 son. Those are 3 difficult days. My dad passed away. That was a difficult day. I went through a divorce. That was more than 1 difficult day. That was several difficult days. I had a business partner that made things hard on me, and there were several difficult days. We all have just gone through the pandemic. That was tough. At the beginning of the pandemic, I had a birth defect raise its ugly head. That from childhood, they didn't know I had a hole in my heart. And I actually had a stroke and a seizure. And in the seizure, I broke my back and I was bedridden for almost a year. And I had to have heart surgery and back surgery. And those were difficult days. I've had, and other things, business stuff and illness and blah, whatever, right? I've had a life, right? I've had a life. But the one thing that is true, no matter what has gone on in my life, is that everything has always been okay. Sometimes it's taken longer than others, right? Sometimes it's hurt more than others. But everything has always been okay whether I believed in God or not. In my drinking and using, I did some crazy shit and it worked out okay. Right? The fact that we're all sitting together in this meeting means that even if you're in the middle of something upsetting now, right? Your past history tells you I get to come to this meeting tonight, so I got a TV or a computer, I got internet, or right? I mean, everything's okay. It's okay. So the problem never is whether or not everything's going to be okay. The problem is always whether or not I'm going to do more damage on the journey to it being okay. Is my fear going to cause more selfishness, more self-centeredness, more dishonesty, more disruption, more damage on the way to the journey that God has me in his hands on the journey to okay? I got to tell you though, and this might upset the party line a little. I am a little pissed off at God. I mean, is that okay? Are you okay? Is it okay? I think so. I think it's okay. I mean, you might not think it's okay. I think it's okay. I am a little pissed. I'm a little mad. Why am I mad? I tell you why I'm mad. 26 years sober. Been sponsoring guys for 25 years. Active member in my home group. Currently got a couple of service positions. Involved in a little mini conference. Sponsor a lot of guys. In constant contact with my sponsor. Pray, meditate, read spiritual books. I mean, I'm not trying to throw out my AA resume, but I'm a reasonably good member of AA, right? I qualify as an everyday member of AA is all I'm saying. And I'm as surrendered as a knucklehead like me can be surrendered. So wouldn't you think that by now, with all this 6-step activity, that God might have taken away all my character defects? I mean, he could, couldn't he? I mean, he's God, isn't he? I mean, he's the guy that invented palm trees, sunsets, pretty girls, and chocolate, for crying out loud. I mean, he's God. And he could. I have no doubt whatsoever that if the big guy said, you know what, I'm going to give Sheldon the break and I'm going to get rid of all his character defects, he could do it. And he doesn't. And if that doesn't chap your hide just a little bit, I mean, you're not paying attention, right? Because it's my if I'm doing AA and I'm trying to do AA, the honest answer is what causes most of the problems in my life is my character defects. So why doesn't he take them? Like if I don't believe that I get a couple of minutes, but if I do, this might be one of my questions. I might say, Pop's got to tell you, you're a badass, man. I mean, sunsets are great. AA loved it. Great sense of humor. Duckbill, platypus, and elephant, right? Great sense of humor. I mean, but why couldn't you just give me a character defect free life? Inquiring minds want to know. And I don't know if this is right or not, but it answers the question for me. That's the thing about what we do in AA, right? We talk about our own experience. And I want you to know, I didn't say this, I usually say this at the beginning of my talk. And from the bottom of my soul, okay, I'm not armed with any more information than any of you guys. I do have a gift. I have the gift of stringing words together and making them sound pretty. I'm a communicator. It's all I am. I don't have any deep knowledge, right? But we all have these experiences. I just can make them sound pretty, right? So my realization is, and you guys have had this before, I'm sure yourselves. What would I do if God took away my character defects? What would be the first thing that would become absent from my life? And I think the honest answer is prayer. It is not the good times that drive me to God. It is not the winning lottery ticket or the beauty, right? I mean, I might for a moment go, oh, thanks, Pops. But that's not what drives me to be connected with him. It is the struggle. It is the fight in step 6. It is the character defects that continue to drive me, that continue to cause me problems, that continue to be the angst, the friction, the problems in my life. It is those very things that drive me back to step 6. Maybe, just maybe, My character defects and the struggles that I have with them are the greatest gift that God gives me. Because maybe it's the thing that drives me to step 6. Wilson only wrote 2 paragraphs, one on 6 and one on 7. Why? And I would challenge that statement. I don't think that's true. I think Bill Wilson wrote an entire book on step 6 and step 7. That's everything we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. That everything that I am doing here is I'm trying to have a better and more meaningful experience with step 6. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous broken, unable to stop drinking, unable to put down the bottle, unable to stop destroying my life with chemicals and alcohol. I was so broken that the very first thing I had to do is admit that I was broken enough to need a relationship with a power greater than myself. And in step 2, I admitted that there might be such a power, that it would be possible for me to have a relationship with God, or if you prefer, it would be possible for me to have a step 6 and step 7 experience. And in step 2, I noticed that there may be a God that could help me with step 1, which was that I needed a 6 and 7 experience. And in step 3, I took the formal terms of surrender. And I admitted that there may be selfishness, self-centeredness, dishonesty, and fear driving me to where I would need to have that relationship. And so I openly said, I'm willing to look for a relationship with God or a 6 and 7 experience. In step 4, I wrote a list of my selfishness and self-centeredness. Selfishness, self-centeredness, this is the root of our troubles. I didn't know what that meant until I wrote step 4. And I wrote a list of what it looks like for me to live in page 60 to 63. And in that inventory, I wrote what it looks like when I don't have a step 6 and 7 experience or a relationship with God. In step 5, for the first time, I admitted to another man and to God, if you like, what it looks like for me when I don't have a relationship with him or a 6 and 7 experience. In step 8 and 9, I set out cleaning up the wreckage of what it looked like when I lived my life without a God-conscious experience or a step 6 and 7 experience. In steps 10 and 11, I make sure that I'm still trying to live my life in a 6 and 7 experience. What happens in 10 and 11 is I do more inventory. I look at my life again, and again I notice where I still need to go back to 6 and 7. 10 and 11 are the drivers that point me towards the light of the God-conscious experience of step 6 and 7. And in step 12, I try to find another man whose hand I can place, as the poet says, on the door that only unlocks to his touch, the door that unlocks for him to have his 6 and 7 experience. It's all we do here. Everything that my life is about, that my journey is, that my search for is, how can I turn more of me away from me and into God? And how can I humbly ask him for his help? Now, in this room or in this Zoom, there's a guy that I sponsor, and there's my sponsor. And there are some dear friends that know some of the intimate parts of my life. And I want you to know I'm not very good at 6 and 7. But no one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We're not saints. But I will tell you this, as the book also says, I will claim my spiritual progress because I have progressed spiritually. I'm a better human now than I was 26 years ago. I'm a better human than I was 10 years ago. I'm hoping to be a better human in 5 years than I am now. I'll tell you something else that's weird about being a communicator in AA, and some of you have this experience. Phil recorded everything I said tonight, and I might disagree with it in 6 months. And that's weird, because people will come up to you and say, well, you said that thing. And I think to myself, well, gosh, I don't know if I would have said that. But if I did, I certainly think that I was an idiot when I said it. So this is just a moment in time. It's just a glimpse into what I'm thinking and feeling now, the current place in my experience in this journey where a knucklehead like me is trying to find communion with you and communion with whatever this power is that's running the universe. I'm going to leave you with a thought. When I was new, I probably a couple of weeks sober. And I was at the meeting after the meeting. And this guy, his name was Johnny, he's not sober. He didn't stay sober very long after this. Asked me what, he was kind of crude about it. You know, what the hell do you expect to get from AA anyway? And I remember it because it made me cry because I didn't have an answer for him. I couldn't tell him what I wanted out of AA. 2020, I told you I had this medical issue. And I'm laying in my bed and I'm in a lot of pain. They had to rebuild my spine with metal, so it was pretty badly broken. And I was waiting for the heart surgery. And it was pretty, my business was, because I drive a lot of what happens at the business and the pandemic, and it looked pretty bleak for me. And I went into a meditation, and I've had 4 or 5 of these, not many, 4 or 5 of these, real powerful meditations, real powerful God consciences. And I got this amazing feeling. It was like purple, and it tasted like purple, and the room glowed. And if you've never had one, it sounds hokey, but it was real. And one of the guys I sponsor asked me afterwards, what put it in a sentence. The only thing that I could tell him was the same thing I wish I could have told Johnny when I was brand new. What do I want out of AA? Coming out of that meditation, I knew 2 things. And I didn't know him then for the first time. I'd known him for decades, but I could put words to them. I knew 2 things. I knew that AA worked. What does that mean? It means that most of the time I'm relatively comfortable inside my own skin. I can be around drugs and alcohol. They have no more power over me than the furniture in the room. It means that I am a free man. It means that I have repaired most of the damage in my life and that I am comfortable and I am okay. And I am not craving a drink. I haven't thought about a drink in a serious way for over 20 years. And for that to be true, what else would have to be true? God is real. This pagan, quasi-Buddhist, atheist Jew, this confused spiritual creature, knows one thing, and that is that there is a power in this universe that is greater than me, that is behind me and stronger than any problem in front of me, and that it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. AA works, and God is real. And so if you want to know my talk in 5 seconds, that's my talk tonight. AA works, and God is real. Thank you for the invite, and thank you for letting me share with you tonight.